All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and in this video, we're going to talk about George Kambosos flying off the handle of Devin Haney on Twitter over manipulation, playing games, and says, man, put up or shut up on this fight or I'm going to VASYL Lomachenko. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon. We're going to talk about the lightweight drama going on between George Kambosos, Devin Haney, VASYL Lomachenko, and the undisputed championship of the world at 135 pounds. Before I get into that, though, make sure this weekend and definitely for Super Bowl weekend that you support the channel by signing up to busr.ag/Fanon. If you bet one for every, as long as you put a wager on the Super Bowl, you will get $10 back for every touchdown that is scored. If you use my promotional code, you'll see it running down here. So make sure you guys take advantage of that. All right, let's get into that. Also, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, all that good stuff. All right, man. This video, I am going to be a little bit in support of Devin Haney. I'm quite sure you guys are going to, some of you guys are going to get ready for me to hate on Devin Haney, but I am not. George Kambosos put out a tweet where he says that when he said he was willing to talk to Devin Haney, he meant it, but that he had never expected Devin Haney to play so many games and do all of this manipulation. And so he's saying, do you want the fight or not? Yes or no? Otherwise, and I'm implying, this is implied, otherwise we're done. Bob, please send a contract to LOOKE for the VASYL Lomachenko fight. My attention is now over there. All right. So first things first, George Kambosos, in my opinion, greatly overvalues himself and greatly overestimates his position that he has in boxing. That's my first take. He is whether he's just assume for the sake of conversation that George Kambosos is the undisputed champion. There are a lot of people that say he's not because of Devin Haney, but let's just assume that that is the case. Okay? Just because you hold 4 belts does not necessarily mean that your fights are going to draw a lot of money. Nor does it mean that you are going to get your way in everything that you want. Now, people will pay lip service to undisputed. That's what I think promoters do. They play lip service to undisputed and the desire to be undisputed. But at the end of the day, those guys are checking how much money comes out of that piggy bank at the end of the day. And George Kambosos is not nearly the star nor the draw that George Kambosos thinks that he is, nor is this fight between himself, Devin Haney, or himself and VASYL Lomachenko nearly as big as he seems to think that it is. So when he says that Devin Haney is manipulating and playing games, I'm going to put that to the side for a second and just point out the fact that George Kambosos himself is creating a barrier to getting fights done by insisting that that fight takes place in Australia. Because wanting to fight in Australia and saying that people have to come over there to fight for that belt because that's what he wants to do puts the whole fight in a situation where it is probably going to earn less money than it would if he was fighting in the United States, and there's going to be less money in the pot to pay the fighters that he would fight, a guy like Devin Haney or a guy like VASYL Lomachenko. So until George Kambosos comes off of that demand to have that fight in Australia, I personally think that whatever delay there is in making those fights is going to persist. Because people are not going to go over there to lose money. You see that Gervonta Tank Davis isn't even in the conversation about fighting George Kambosos because Leonard Ellerbe and Mayweather Promotions are very clear that none of these guys are as big a names as they think they are, and these fights that everybody thinks is so big are not that big. But as far as Devin Haney and the manipulation and what is called it, manipulating and playing games and all of that, look, that I think George Kambosos is just as big a part of that as Devin Haney is, because he does as much talking in the media as Devin Haney does. I listen to most of the conversation that's going on about the fight between the two of them, and there is so much information out there, misinformation, half misinterpreted information out there, contradictory information out there, that it makes people believe a lot of things that may or may not be true. Take, for example, when Lou DiBella said that that DAZN or Eddie Hearn and Matchroom had never made a fight offer for the fight, that Eddie Hearn and DAZN were not paying for the fight, that George Kambosos and Lou DiBella made an offer to Eddie Hearn and they turned that offer down, right? So on one side, Lou DiBella is clearly saying we made an offer, they didn't make an offer. If you listen to a lot of other conversations going on, you hear people actually saying that Eddie Hearn made an offer to them and Eddie Hearn is going to pay for the fight and all of that, where what Eddie Hearn really said was that he is looking for a scenario in which they may be able to pay for that fight. But when he said it, he was talking about fighting somewhere outside of Australia, right? He said that maybe somebody in the Middle East can pay for the fight and we could have the fight over in, I suppose, the United Arab Emirates or Dubai or somewhere like that, where they could come off of a lot of money for that undisputed fight, right? But Eddie Hearn, I've still never heard say that he's going to make an offer or had actually made an offer to George Kambosos. But all of the conversation going on around it would make you believe that an offer had been made and George Kambosos has either was holding off and has not accepted it yet or whatever. But nobody has said out of the mouths of any of the promoters involved, which are Lou DiBella or Eddie Hearn, that offer had been made. And there's just a lot of talk about, as soon as Devin says something, then like he's willing to accept whatever terms it was. I'll take the vaccine to go to Australia. I agree to go into Australia. That means he's agreeing to actual terms that were laid out on a piece of paper with the money, the purses and all that, the actual fight location and all that on it. And there's nothing to say that is the case, right? But I don't really believe that is the holdup on making these fights. I think that if George Kambosos was more realistic about what his position in boxing is, then you would get a fight made a lot quicker than otherwise. And what that position is that he was just a mandatory challenger that nobody knew or really cared about 3 months ago. And he was fighting a guy in Teofimo Lopez that not a lot of people really cared about when he beat him. So the fact that he gets his hands on the belts that Teofimo Lopez had when Teofimo Lopez himself wasn't that popular, I don't understand why George Kambosos thinks that this elevates him into some stratosphere of laying down the law to what Eddie Hearn and Devin Haney are going to do, or what Lomachenko and those guys are going to do. He's a guy that is holding a belt that he's holding belts that he got off of another guy that wasn't that popular. And until he kind of comes off his high hog a little bit, I think it's going to be hard for anybody to make those fights. And I think the same thing would be the same situation if he goes from that conversation with Eddie Hearn, Bill Haney, and Devin Haney to going exclusively to a conversation with Bob Arum and Lomachenko. Because Bob Arum said the same thing. He's like, yeah, we'd like to fight, but we don't know who's going to pay for it when it's in Australia, and the Australian government isn't going to chip in or subsidize the fight because COVID is ravaging the country. So, I just think George Kambosos at this point in time I hate saying the pot calling the kettle black, but it is what it is. I don't like that phrase because of the connotations associated with it, but you get my point, man. He's mud calling dirt dirty. You know what I mean? Devin Haney's doing a lot of talking. You're doing a lot of talking. And probably neither one of you guys are going to be able to make much headway towards making that fight as long as George Kambosos insists on it being in Australia. But anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Peace.